I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Mercedes-Benz GLA, the smallest SUV that you can buy with the three-pointed star on the bonnet. And this particular GLA is the brand new second generation version of this car. And let me tell you right from the start, it's a big improvement over the original first gen GLA, which was really just the previous A-Class with a tiny little lift. Now the GLA's really been given its own persona. The shape is quite different from an A-Class and the looks are as well. It's shorter than an A-Class, it's now wider, and it's a lot taller than the A-Class, about 12 centimeters taller in fact. So it looks more like an SUV, and as we'll find out in just a second, the seating position is also much more SUV-like inside a cabin that's far higher quality than before. I actually think it's a reasonably good looking car. I quite like it with the diamond studded grille and these 5-spoke wheels that continue to look cool basically on anything Mercedes-Benz fit them to. And this bright white color also suits the car in my opinion. But why would you choose a GLA over a vehicle like the Audi Q3 or the BMW X1? Well, it really comes down to this cabin, which is kind of on another level to its competitors. The design, which is really extroverted, won't be for everybody, but I think the way the technology works is good, and quality is also massively better than the previous gen GLA, which was fine, but just quite plasticky in the cabin. Now, almost everything is lined in soft touch materials, and it feels like a proper Mercedes-Benz in here. But let's start with the tech, and I think there's a really interesting development in the new GLA compared to other Mercedes-Benz cars with this new interior, and that's that they've made this incredible MBUX dual screen setup look more integrated than in the other cars that use it. In most cars it's sitting really proud and really high on the dash, but here you can see how they've actually stuck it down into the dash almost like an integrated screen, and I think that works better, to be honest. For the tech as a whole, it's definitely sophisticated and a little complicated, but if you actually spend the time, if you buy the car, learning how it all works, it can be quite rewarding. Now, this central screen here is a touchscreen. It can also be manipulated through this trackpad between the seats, which is kind of harking back to how Mercedes-Benz tech has been controlled for, the last 10 or 15 years. But you can also control it via a trackpad, the left trackpad here on the steering wheel. The wheel itself is quite attractive, but it does have these real big command panels here inside this perforated leather wrapped rim. Now on the right side, that trackpad controls your driver's screen, which is the same size as the central screen, and it's really customizable. You can put a cool binocular view of a full map up there. You can put your media, your trip computer information. There's heaps and heaps of customization in this tech. Now, these screens are hooked up to an optional Burmester stereo in this car that sounds really good. But you get other cool stuff like ambient lighting, which is set to like a violet color at the moment in this car that also looks nice. And broadly, I think that tech integrates pretty well into the broader design of this dash. We have these really cool aviation style air vents here that also have that ambient light shining through them, so they're functional and quite beautiful in my opinion. We've got this stitched leather-like material on the doors and on the dash. I would say in the GLA, compared to the larger GLB, it does feel a little bit thinner, not completely soft touch. And for me, I tend to kind of rest my arm on the sill on a long drive, so that does in fact matter. No complaints though about the seats, which are supportive and firm in quite a Germanic way, but they do have a bit of give. You can get the multi-contour seat if you're after the softest and kind of most plush seat available in an A-Class, and you don't have to go for this black and grey. There are lighter colours available as well. Now this car has carbon fibre trim, which I'm not sure is necessary for a non-AMG, non-performance spec. I'd probably go for a metal or a wood, but that's entirely personal, and there's quite a lot of customization you can do in the new GLA. Seat controls are electric, they're up here on the doors. We've got memory and available heating and cooling as well for the seats, which is really suitable for Australia. Today, it's freezing, but in about 2 months' time, it'll be boiling, so you want heating and cooling. And practicality is better than most in this segment, to be honest. Big cup holders between the seats, a wireless charging pad, lots of USB-C ports in this car. So if you haven't moved on to USB-C yet, you'll need to get some adapters like this one that's actually sitting in the center box, which is flock lined to stop things from sliding around and making an annoying noise. So up front, I think it's a really nice place to be, quite cutting edge in terms of tech, but the quality runs pretty deep, I reckon. But let's check out the back seat, which is bigger than the old version. And this is one of those interesting times where a car is actually made smaller in terms of length, but grows in practicality and interior space. So Mercedes-Benz have been able to do that by pushing the wheels right out to the corners and increasing the wheelbase of the car. So we've got just under 10 centimeters of additional legroom. In the previous version, if you sat in the back with an adult up front, then your legs would be really jammed up against the seat. But you can see there is about 10 centimeters more legroom now. So that's truth in advertising if I've ever seen it. Headroom is also decent. The car is taller, so I'm 6 foot, I can sit up straight and I don't have to bend my head down. And toe room's good too. Now in a pinch, you'll be able to fit someone in the center, but it's still not a massive car, so you should really think of it as a 4-seater. Mercedes have many, many larger SUVs if what you want is more interior space. Now here on the center console, we have air vents, which is great, and we have a pop-down function here with 2 more USB-C ports. No center armrest though, which is a bit of a surprise. There's my surprise live on camera, in fact. That's usually something that's a given in a vehicle of this price, but there you go. But we do have bottle holders in the doors, and those, I'll say, semi-soft door trims continue here in the second row. So all in all, it is quite a nice place to spend time. But what about the boot? Moving around here to the back of the GLA, for myself, the front angles are probably a little bit stronger. It's quite soft here at the rear end, but by no means a bad looking car. This one's the GLA 250 4MATIC, as you can see by the badges. So we have the up-spec Mercedes 2-litre turbo and all-wheel drive, and we'll see how that fares on road shortly. We also have a power tailgate, which gets out of the way fairly smartly, revealing a boot that's bigger than before, and that's because they've made the car a little bit taller. We can remember it's shorter, so it's actually harder to maximize cargo space, but it still has been done. So 435 litres is the figure, 14 litres up on the old car, so just a little bump. But as you can see, we can fit quite a few large bags here in the back, so you know, for the occasional airport run or something, it'll work fine. The boot floor has 2 heights. You can have a flush height, which lets you pull things straight in and out with absolutely no effort, basically, or you can put it lower, like it is here. The only reason that's possible, though, is because there's no spare wheel and tyre in the new GLA. So we have run-flat Continentals on this car. Country buyers will probably want to consider whether or not that's the right fit, but in town, I think it will still work okay. Now, chrome garnish here to protect your paintwork, which is a good feature, as is the 40-20-40 folding rear seats. We have an electric control there to lower the tailgate, so we can jump into the driver's seat and see what the new GLA is like on road. So what's the new GLA like to drive then? Have those changes in proportions and the new platform made this a better SUV to drive than the previous first generation? Well, the simple answer to that question is yes, they have made it better to drive. The GLA is now really an SUV kind of designed to provide, you know, still a dynamic and agile experience like the first gen, but really a more comfortable and plush experience, I would say. Now, all of that will change when the new GLA 45 AMG variant comes out in Australia soon, but this one is the mid-spec GLA 250 4MATIC, and this is the one that you'll buy if you're not looking for a sports SUV, but you are looking for a decent amount of power and pickup, because that's what you get with the 250. This engine is a Mercedes-Benz 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol, producing 165 kilowatts of power and 350 newton meters of torque. And in a vehicle as small as this, that's quite a bit of punch. So if I put my foot down, it makes a decent raspy note, but more importantly, it makes good progress. And merging onto a 110 km/h highway, for example, is easily dispatched by the 250 engine. Now, that engine pairs to a new 8-speed dual-clutch automatic gearbox, a Mercedes-Benz design, and that gearbox is okay. Most of the time it's imperceptible and unremarkable, but I have noticed that it does tend to hunt a little bit for gears. So when you put your foot down like that, it can tend to try one, then quickly go to another, then finally settle on another. And I think probably slightly more strategic or quick thinking shifts would be good, but this is a new car and the gearbox map may not have sort of settled with a driver behavior profile yet. There's also a GLA 200, that's the base model. That's a 1.3 litre Renault-sourced turbo petrol 4-cylinder, making 120 kilowatts of power and 200 Newton meters of torque. And I would just say that that engine is not the best to go into a Mercedes product. The 250 is superior in terms of refinement and partnership to the dual clutch automatic. And importantly, the GLA 250 also scores not just the all-wheel drive system, but also the independent rear suspension that supports that all-wheel drive system, whereas the GLA 200 runs a cheaper, less refined torsion beam rear suspension that occasionally sends bangs through the cabin of the vehicles that Mercedes puts it in, and that's not really becoming of the three-pointed star, in my opinion. So I'd pretend that car doesn't exist and go for the GLA 250 if you decide that you want one of these little Benz SUVs. So how does it ride and handle? Pretty well. The ride is a good mix of controlled but compliant. You do feel the road surface, but with these wheels, 19-inch wheels, we still have a decent amount of sidewall, so we don't have crashing over bumps and imperfections or anything like that. In fact, it rides quite well, but still with a sporty kind of edge to it, I would say, and it does handle quite pleasantly in the corners when you start pitching it in. But that said, we are riding higher, so it doesn't have that kind of hatchback-like reflexes as the previous one did. Instead, there's a little more roll, but that's the trade-off for sitting higher and being overall a little more comfortable. And I think most people will be okay with that, because of course you can just go for a Mercedes A-Class if you want a low-riding, sportier car on this platform. It's pretty refined, pretty quiet in here. The view out's pretty good, I would say. The mirrors are a big size. It's an easy and livable car. But keep in mind, you do have to pay a little extra if you want the full safety suite on the new GLA with the driver assistance package, but it's a reasonably priced option and worth doing to make sure you have everything you can have on this car from a safety perspective. But even in a basic sense, it still comes with things like AEB and a crisp reversing camera, plus lane keeping assist. So those are my detailed opinions on the new 2021 Mercedes-Benz GLA. This car is a really good improvement from the previous GLA, and it's more comfortable than Benz's A-Class hatchback. So if your priority is a city-size Mercedes-Benz that's quite plush, quite easy to live with, then a GLA is going to be a really good option. My view is that you should also closely consider the new Audi Q3, which is really good and less expensive than the GLA, but I think that this Mercedes is a better drive than BMW's X1, but what we need to do is get those three into a new comparison to really suss it out. So that's something to look forward to in future, and to make sure you don't miss that, I encourage you to hit subscribe down below and the notification bell. Leave me a comment while you're at it, let me know your feelings on the new GLA, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.